you're thinking about being curious on the cultural level, what is it that you want to learn? What's your motivation behind it? And what are the ways that you might go about it? I think there's some questions we can ask ourselves to get us moving forward in that right direction. That's the level of curiosity, I think, that helps us to see more clearly in an age of disinformation and misinformation. It's simply, I'd like to know more so that I can make a better decision. I can be more informed about this topic, this culture, this individual. Welcome back to Unpacked Culture Chronicles. I'm your host, Danielle Marshall. I'm an equity strategist and executive coach. And today's episode is a little different and really special. As we close out season 1, I wanted to take some time to pause, reflect, and share a bit of the journey behind this project. When I first launched this podcast, my hope was to create a space where curiosity could lead. A place where we could slow down, unpack layers of culture, and find ways of connecting across difference. What unfolded over this season was more powerful than I could have ever imagined. So today I've invited a very special guest, my friend and colleague Nicole, to join me. She's going to turn the tables and interview me, so we can reflect together on what this first season has taught us, surprised us with, and open up for what's ahead. I'm so glad that you're here for this conversation. So let's dive in.
We need no introduction today. I am here with the host of Unpacked Culture Chronicles, Danielle Marshall. Danielle, it's so exciting to be here with you and ask you some questions. How you doing?
I am delightful today. Thanks for coming back to be my interviewee or interviewer, I should say, today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. So I have a couple questions. We're just talking about season 1. Season 1 is wrapping up. So let's go over some stuff. Let's get your thoughts out there. All right. My first question for you today. What was your original hope when you launched Unpacked Culture Chronicles?
Yeah. So when I first got the idea for this podcast, it was around the time where I was doing several assessments with my clients. And so I was focusing on the intercultural development inventory, which basically helps people to understand better how they respond to cultural similarities and differences. And part of the assessment, after you complete the assessment and we debrief it and talk about what this could mean for your life, there's an opportunity to do some deeper work that comes through a development plan. And one of the things that was very clear in multiple conversations, and it almost didn't matter what sector I was working in or if they were newer versus older, more seasoned staff, there was this real fear, quite frankly, of, we want to engage in this work. We want to understand cultures better, but we don't even know where to get started. We don't know how to, on a basic level, have conversations with people. And, I at first really honestly didn't understand that because from my perspectives, we talk to people, but that is not the case for a lot of folks. They were worried about tripping over themselves, offending people, or just really just not having the language. And so when I thought about how I could bring more of these conversations to people, I said, I really enjoy having conversations with people. I said, let me start a podcast that does focus on culture, but also allows people to tell their stories in their own words. And so whether we're talking about family dynamics or work or anything that has to do with life, I want it basically to be able to shine a light on it. So that was sort of the initial impetus for Culture Chronicles. And partially the reason I even called it Unpacked Culture Chronicles is I think we all have a story, and stories are incredibly powerful. And I think we can all learn from one another's stories should we choose to listen to them. But this unpacking of it is being able to dive a little bit deeper and not just hear the surface level, but to ask those meaningful questions that really get sort of to the root of people's core beliefs and values.
Wow. I think that it was really a needed thing also, because I completely agree with you. I always tell my kiddos, there is something you'll love about everybody if you take the time to get to know them. And it's kind of the same thing where you just how to get to know them, right? And I think you're providing that, the questions and the language.
Well, thank you.
What would you say surprised you the most this season, either from your guests or from your own experience as the host of this podcast?
Yeah. I think the thing that surprised me the most is while I went into these conversations with the understanding like that there was going to be learning involved for this and I was very much thinking about my audience at that point in time. What's been most surprising for me is how much I've learned on the journey. I consider myself a lifelong learner and I'm always open to learning new things, but it was just so many ways people showed up, like the language they chose to use, how they thought about their culture, belonging and or not belonging to it, the strategies that people use. So it's not necessarily a huge surprise, and yet it felt like what a gift. What a gift.
They're teaching you as much as you're teaching them. Isn't that so nice?
Absolutely.
Was there a moment or story shared this season that you would say stayed with you longer than you expected?
I think that's a harder question to answer. I am thinking about Enzo's podcast in particular, as he was talking a little bit more about what it meant to be an immigrant as a young child from Haiti and his struggle to find acceptance and belonging in this country, right? He spoke about being Black for the first time in America, but not yet being the type of Black that other Black Americans were. And I happened to know him as a child. And so we grew up together. And so I was present for a lot of this. And yet I didn't even have that deep of an understanding. And so as I'm listening to him speak about that, I think that really hit home for me in a different kind of way. But I think the other piece of his story that really struck me, and if you listen to the podcast, I almost sort of lost words for a second, is as he was talking about what it means to come from a country that had a dictatorship to live in America, which has been, called the land of the free, but to also be walking in this country and nation at a time when it feels like we're entering back into this space of dictatorship, where we have an autocrat as a leader, where, democracy feels like it's crumbling. And while I think for listeners and people that I just dialogue with on a regular basis who are from here, I think we have fears and concerns, but it was heightened for me listening to someone who left a country like that and specifically came to this country to get away from that style of leadership. And so it stayed with me as pretty profound.
Absolutely, absolutely. And aren't we lucky that he is speaking on that now and able to relate those experiences? Yeah, that is definitely something that would stick with you. I can see why. Were there any common threads or patterns that emerged across different guests' experiences surrounding culture and curiosity that you noticed? I'm sure there
It
was
was
lots.
Yeah, there were some common threads for sure. Like the one thing that really stood out to me in that moment was how many people, when I asked them like what their go-to strategies were around bridging across difference, really talked about the pause. And it's something that I practice. And I don't think I appreciated how frequently other people were using this as well. But the pause, for people who might just be hearing this for the first time today, really refers to when you're in conversation with someone and you can feel there's some cultural tension, there's some misunderstanding. And I would say, even broader than just culture, when you're having to bridge across difference, period, to pause and sort of compose yourself and ask yourself questions. So I heard people say, what else might be true here? They're pausing to sort of reassess in their body what was coming up. So they were leaning more into somatic body practices, like where am I feeling this? Am I triggered in my head? Do I feel it in my heart? Is it presenting somewhere in my body? But also, I think the pause was really designed for a lot of folks to not necessarily just take the bait and be sucked into like arguing back, but to really assess in the moment, where do I want this conversation to go next? And what are the ways that I might begin to bridge? And for me, that just it means so much, because when I think about that, and I find myself doing that today, even as I'm sending text messages, like I'm pausing before I hit send, and I'm like, is that the message that I want to send in this moment? Does it help me get closer to my goal, or is it actually hindering me from getting towards my goal? And people forget, sometimes we think about goals like in the workplace, right? And we're thinking about the big things that we have to do and the communication issues there. But I'm like, sometimes it can be your partner or your kid that you're talking to, and nonetheless, we're still trying to bridge across some kind of difference or misunderstanding.
Okay, so that leads me into my next question. And I almost wonder if it might be the same answer. If listeners walked away with just one big idea from season one, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, I'm going to switch my answer here. But my
All
answer
right.
is, and so yes to everything that I just said. And if you walk away with nothing else, I want you to think about the power that curiosity holds. And so when I talk about curiosity, and we've had guests that have talked about curiosity, like, I just want to get curious about my own interests, right? I think back to Camille, who was on earlier in the season. And, before she was even worried about like cultural curiosity, she's like, hey, is there a new hobby I wanted to learn? Like, how do I learn that in real time? Can I watch videos? Can I talk to someone about it? Right. And so being able to assess that for ourselves and figure out sort of what our starting point is, I think is really powerful, because if you're thinking about being curious on the cultural level, what is it that you want to learn? What's your motivation behind it? And like, what are the ways that you might go about it? I think there's some questions we can ask ourselves to get us moving forward in that right direction. But then also, like, I think curiosity real time allows us to do some things differently. So, like, if you read an article or you hear a story on the news, like, are we just accepting it as, like, well, I heard that this morning at 8 a.m. And so therefore that's true? Are we starting to ask those deeper questions, like, who reported on this story, who was the author behind it, what are their motivations, do they have a particular position that they're trying to advocate for? That's the level of curiosity I think that helps us to see better, more clearly, I should say, in an age of disinformation and misinformation. So instead of just believing like the first thing that's said, and as I say that, I don't mean it to be contentious, because I think we can be curious without necessarily leaning into the, well, I'm going to dig deeper because I don't believe you. Like, it doesn't have to come from that place. It's simply, I'd like to know more so that I can make a better decision. I can be more informed about this topic, this culture, this individual.
Absolutely. Are there any small but powerful actions that you hope listeners will feel encouraged to take after hearing all these stories?
Yeah, I think it's just to engage with people that may think differently from you. So we focused a lot on culture. And when it comes down to culture, we absolutely are going to see the world differently. But sometimes it's even people within your own cultural group, right? So you have a shared identity. That could be a great starting place for folks, because even within the identity that we share with others, we do not think or process the world exactly the same, because there are still other lived experiences. So whether it is you grew up on the East Coast versus the West Coast, you went to a college, or you have, a GED, or whatever it happens to be, there are nuances within our social identities. And so by starting to get curious more about these lived experiences, I think that people really can sort of shape their viewpoints much more broadly than perhaps we're thinking today. And then I encourage people to seek out resources. There's so many podcasts and books, and there's just so much that's available for us at this time. Take advantage of it.
Yes, for sure. Were there times this season where you found yourself rethinking a long held belief or assumption?
I don't know that I had my beliefs challenged in a way where I rethought assumptions, but it did make me more curious about things I held as beliefs. At certain points, it may have been more about like, hey, how strongly do I actually believe this, right? And so it's hard to answer this question, because I don't have a specific instance where I feel like I was really, really challenged in my belief system. However, again, it was the impetus to dig a little bit deeper. Like, how would you show up today? And I cannot remember what guest it was, but someone had asked me about my first job. Right. And so, are you the person? I think actually it might have been Tanitra that asked this question. Like, are you the same person today as you were when you started working? And I'm like, no. Right. And so even in that, like, it's not challenging my belief system, but it is making me reflect on the growth that's happened over the course of these years. And when I think back to our first episode with Melissa, again, she more challenged me directly in terms of like language choices that we use. And so I did not take offense to what she was saying when we were talking about mainland versus continental, as we're referring to Hawaii, or how she views herself not as a Asian American in the way that I might think about it, but really more of a potpourri of a variety of identities. So while I was challenged real time, what it did have me do for myself is reflect on how seamlessly we sort of use language and we just never really think about the root of that language and how it might land on other people. And so, again, I keep going back to this idea that these conversations have been a gift for me because I'm willing to sit both in humility in these moments, but also in curiosity and to truly hear what people are saying.
And I think that a lot of the time when we're challenged like that or something happens like that, we can, and I mean, we as a broad general term can take it offensively instead of putting the curiosity into it and asking the questions and saying, oh, thank you so much for educating me on that. And now that you know better, you're going to do better. Right. So I think that what you're providing, the curiosity, is so important in a world right now where everything can feel a little defensive and like we're always on guard, and that's not what it's about, right? It's about getting to know each other.
Yeah. It's just this idea almost that we are leaning into perfection, right? Like I have to be perfect in this moment. I have to say the right thing. I have to always know the answer. And I don't know if this is the other gift that I get now because of age, but like I think with age you begin to really see how much you don't know.
Yes.
And so for every lesson that I learn, like again, I am appreciative of said lesson and it opens my eyes up to how much more that there is still in front of me that I have no clue about yet. And so I think that is humbling in its own right, is to just say, like, I don't know it all. And so if I want to continue on this journey, right? So again, I think about, do my actions and behaviors align with what I am seeking as a goal? And if my goal is to be that continuous learner, then sometimes the best strategy for me is to be quiet and listen to somebody else who knows more about this topic than I do.
Yes. And knowing that that's not always you, right?
Absolutely.
How has the support or feedback from your listeners shaped your experience?
Oh, that has been such a just a wonderful experience for me. I have had people say, and actually a number of people have said this and it kind of tickles me and I'm like, oh, maybe a little scary at the same time, but they've said, when I go to engage with someone in a conversation, I feel like you're in the back of my head saying like, what else might be true, or ask another question. And so I love when people do that, not necessarily because they're attaching it to me, but like I hope to inspire other people to lean into curiosity, to find the joy in it, and again, to take that pause before they just leap into the conversation, to say like, what am I really trying to get out of this, and like how can I be more curious in the process? That's been really meaningful. But the other thing that I think has been meaningful is to hear back stories from folks who were locked in conflict with one another. And they used smart questions and that curiosity again to find ways to bridge across that difference. So they were not only able to listen to the person more fully and be present for the conversation, but they reiterate it back. So it sounds like what you're saying is, right, XYZ. They gave the person an opportunity to adjust, like if maybe they misunderstood something. And then they found some kind of commonality, which allowed them to bridge across that gap. That feels so powerful at a time where we're polarized as a nation and everybody's sort of digging their heels in and they're like, I have to absolutely be right. And I'm like, where are the places where we both might be right? Right? Like
Yes.
that just feels it feels absolutely amazing to be able to say that, and it feels like I'm having an impact in a way that's meaningful to me.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad personally that you're able to expand that onto a podcast platform because I've known you for a long time. And I can say, in knowing you, that even inadvertently, you didn't mean to do this, but you do live in the back of my head when conflict arises. And before I met you, I never even thought that culture could have anything to do with it, which is the craziest thing. But I also say this for listeners as a white cis woman. I just was unaware. So meeting you, I feel like has made my world bigger, if that makes sense, because there's more to everybody. And you've given me a lot of questions that I'm able to be curious with and get to know more. And like we said, find something to love about everybody. So I appreciate that personally from
Thank
my
you for
point of view.
sharing that. Because this is the first time I'm hearing this from you, and
It is.
I'll tell you, so listeners, this will be, just an audio recording when it gets to you, but I can see Nicole's face right now. And so one of the joys for me also is seeing how people light up when you have access to something that you may not like. It's always been within you, but you just didn't know how to tap into it before. But it changes us as people because it's like, I have this new tool. I have this new strategy. It helps me navigate through life a little bit easier. And to me, to see your body language in this moment as you're talking about it, it's like I can see the joy. And
World
that,
feels bigger.
yeah, I really love that. I'm happy for you as well.
Well, thank you. And you did it and you didn't even know it. So look at that. We're having a whole moment here. My very last question for you. I mean, I have millions of questions for you always, but on this topic today, my last question, is there anyone you want to thank for making this first season possible? I know, I see your
Oh
face.
my gosh. I want to thank everybody, right? I definitely, I will start with, my guest. I'm going to start there. And that's because they gave up their time and their stories. They understood what we were trying to accomplish. And they were like the first people when I asked, are you interested in this? That they jumped up and said, yes. Like, I want to make sure that I tell this story. I think this is such an important time in our history as a nation to be able to talk about these things. And so with profound gratitude for, to them, I say thank you. The other group that I want to say, and you are part of this, is my team behind the scenes who has been doing everything from the editing of the podcast to getting the blurbs out on, social media to running some research behind the scenes. Like, there's been so much. And now, Nicole, you're sitting here interviewing me for the second time. I would not be able to do this without you all. There is this sense, and several people in this nation have said this, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and you'll be your success on your own. And I'm like, BS. I don't believe that at all. I think that we all need one another in order to thrive in society. Like, yes, I am more than capable of doing many things on my own, and many hands make the load lighter. And so I have so much gratitude for you all for like chipping in, and no request has been too much as I ask for a ton of things that I'm like, we could change this, and I'm thinking about this, and let's move this. And you all just jump in and you always say yes, which I appreciate. But actually, no, you don't always say yes. I appreciate you also because you challenge me sometimes.
We're
And that's
happy
the
to
whole
make it happen.
team. Like, have you
Yeah.
really thought that through? But
But
I
we know
appreciate
when you
that.
reach brilliance, and we are fully on board.
I thank you for that. Yes. And then, finally, I would just say, I think the people that have been listening to the podcast, those who have offered feedback, those who have actually been silent listeners, and I haven't necessarily heard from, but I appreciate the engagement. I appreciate that folks are willing to dive into this topic and just sit with it. Whether you agree with everything that's said from my perspective or from a guest, like, that's okay. Like, I'm not asking you to come in and just accept everything again. I want you to use discernment. I want you to get curious and be like, hey, I heard this thing. Let me do a little bit more research into it. But because of the engagement, it feels like a really wonderful place to be. And this has been a passion project, obviously connected to my work. And yet it's one that is giving me life in this moment.
That's so good to hear. And I know I said that was the last question, but as this is the season finale, what are your last words to your listeners?
Yeah, I would say like this is going to be airing in the summertime. Take advantage of vacations, staycations, the quiet times. Even if you're going to the beach or the park for the day, get curious about something. Have a conversation with someone that you just don't know. And actually, I'm going to share an example of something that happened just over this weekend. I was down at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. And I had gone down for a festival here called Artscape, which is one of the largest arts festivals in the country, held in Baltimore. And there was a convention going on um, downtown, and I noticed as we were driving in, there were a lot of people that were Muslim, and tons of women in hijabs, and like families, so the dads and the kids and everybody's sort of running around. And I wondered what it was that was going on. And so as I sat down for lunch, my mom was with me, and we were just sitting down eating. Two ladies walked into the cafe that we were at. And I just turned to them and I said, I noticed that there's a tremendous amount of like Muslim people. And I think you're attending something at the convention center. I said, could you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? And the woman's face lit up and she's like, oh, we're here, we're learning more about lots of things about our faith. We have some prayers that are going on. We're talking about things related to family dynamics and raising kids, and like she just covered so many topics that they were learning about. And I just simply said, I said, thank you so much for for sharing that with me. And I had a couple more questions for her because I was curious. I was like, is this like a national conference that happens every year? And she's like, oh, we travel around the world, or excuse me, around the country, and every year it's in a different place. And I was able to learn a little bit, but I understood also they were eating lunch, so I didn't want to keep them so much. So I thanked them for their time. And as I was getting ready to turn back around, she looked at me and she said, thank you so much for asking. And in that moment, like, again, I felt like a profound connection, but also it's a reminder for people at those times where we assume we're going to be offensive to someone else. She couldn't wait to tell her story to me. I didn't know her. I didn't know the woman, and I'm guessing that was her mom because they looked a little bit alike, that she was sitting next to. I didn't know that. I had a question, and I asked, "Is it okay? Can I ask you a little bit about this event that you're attending?" And again, she lit up. And so as I think about that, I'm like, how many missed opportunities and connections are happening on a daily basis because we don't choose to engage, or we make an assumption on behalf of another person that is not even rooted in truth.
It seems like you really made her feel seen and then you made her feel heard. And that is such a special thing. It's such a special thing to come out of just being curious and asking those questions.
It is, and it is also not something that I am uniquely positioned to do. I think that we can all make people feel seen and heard. You know, Even as simple as when you go into a store, when you are ordering food, put your cell phone down, make eye contact. Look at the person's name tag, respond with their name or ask them their name, like make them feel like they're more than just a service provider for you.
More
They're a
than
person.
just. Leave it there, right? Make them
Yeah.
feel like they're more than just.
Yeah.
Dot,
Yeah.
dot, dot.
Exactly. Exactly. See
Well,
people's humanity.
that just made me feel so warm and fuzzy. I want to go out and interact with the world now. And I don't usually feel that way. I'll say that.
Well, there you go. There's your challenge for the summer. Get out there and go talk to folks, interact. And I do promise you, I mean, the one thing that keeps coming up for me is that I feel more connected. I feel more joy. I'm learning lots of different things, but I'm also finding myself in places that I wouldn't traditionally have an opportunity to engage with. And it seriously it's changing my life. And I love it.
It is. So even though you're doing it in a just curious way that comes naturally to you, you're still benefiting from it. And that's so wonderful. And such a roundabout, like a great lesson to get. Not that you want to do it for that reason, but it's a great benefit, a great payoff to get for being curious, I think.
Absolutely.
Opening those opportunities. Thank you so much, Danielle. I've loved season 1. I can't wait to hear what season 2 brings. Do you want to share any
Yes, actually, I'll
spoilers?
I'll give a little preview into season 2. So in season 1, we talked so much about curiosity and culture, and how we can get more curious. And in season 2, we're going to be focusing more on why that curiosity around culture matters, and specifically, we're going to be putting our lenses on the workplace. And what is interesting about this is, as I think about some of the guests that I have lined up already, we're going to be talking about culture as it applies to healthcare and education, and just all these different ways that we might show up in nonprofit services, et cetera. And we're living again in this time where people are trying to dismiss the importance of culture. They're trying to like sort of melt us back down into like one amalgamation of like, this is US culture. And I'm like, but there are nuances we have to pay attention to. And so I want you to hear from real professionals in their respective fields who can speak to why culture matters in the work that they do, and why, if we dismiss it, the work doesn't get done as effectively as it could be.
Yes. And hearing you say healthcare, I'm really excited to hear about that, just because I know there are some disparities there and there are some big gaps that really affect people's lives very, very heavily. So I am so excited to hear everybody coming in on season 2.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that folks join us. And then the last plug that I'll throw out there for folks is if you would like to join our podcast as a guest, we absolutely want you to be able to lean into that. We're going to put the link to where you can sign up as a guest in the show notes for this episode. And so I invite you to come on. I promise it is a ton of fun. I hope it's fun talking to me. I think that's part of the feedback I've gotten.
It is.
But we're gonna have a good time. But I want to really help you to be able to tell your story on this platform and share it with people that are engaged and willing to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Nicole, thank you. I appreciate you dearly and love the fact that we were able to sit down for this interview.
I do too. And I hope you have a wonderful summer. And I can't wait to hear you back in season 2.
Thank you so much. You too. Before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to every guest this season who's trusted us with their stories. Thank you to every listener who tuned in, who stayed curious with us, even when the conversations got a little messy or uncomfortable. And thank you to everyone who reached out, who shared an episode with a friend, or who sat quietly with these ideas. If there's one thing that I'm carrying with me from this season, it's that curiosity isn't about having the right answers. It's about being willing to sit with better questions. It's about noticing the small moments, the quiet assumptions, the invisible cultural patterns, and choosing to still stay open, even when it would be easier to close down. As we look ahead to season 2, I'm excited to dig even deeper into how culture shows up in our lives, our workplaces, and our leadership. We'll keep unpacking the complexities, and we'll keep lifting up new voices. We'll also keep asking, what else might be possible if we stayed curious just a little longer? And if you're feeling called to deepen your own cultural competence, whether as a leader, a team member, or simply a human being, I'd love to support you. I offer one-on-one coaching designed to help you strengthen your cultural awareness, navigate differences with more confidence, and lead with greater impact. You can learn more and reach out at culture-principles.com. Until then, I invite you to keep the conversation going in your communities, workplaces, and in yourself. Stay curious, stay open, and stay connected. Thank you for being a part of Unpacked Culture Chronicles Season 1. Be well, and we'll see you soon.